Hey guys, and welcome back to another Borderlands 4 video. Today we're gonna take a look at what's essentially an infinite damage scaling build for Rafa. His red tree is one of the best in the game. It literally makes the class strong almost right out of the gates, and with a few special perk combinations we can make this even stronger than that. We're gonna specifically aim for ricochet damage, as much of that as possible. So without further ado, let's jump right in it. Now, what makes this build so absolutely powerful is all of the synergies with Jacob's ricochet projectiles that we can get both from the build as well as from some of the item combinations. So here is what we are working with in terms of the skill tree. We're going to mainly focus on the Peacebreaker cannons, so the red line, and in this case aiming all the way down at a double auto shot capstone, which replaces the shoulder mounted cannons with a pair of shotguns that can now have a chance to ricochet bullets. But we have other perks here and other weapons and items that will further facilitate that. So on the way, we're gonna pick Sitar for the extra gun damage. We're going to go with Instincto Augment as the main one. This is going to double the critical hit chance and critical hit damage, and it's going to extend our skill duration. So as we defeat enemies with it, it's going to restore a portion of that duration and further extend it actually, which is going to also complement Huerga that does pretty much exactly the same thing but on critical hits. So both critical hits and defeating enemies now does exactly the same thing, restoring or extending in this case your action skill duration. I've also got a couple of survivability abilities here. Sia is one of them, which replenishes shields. Trust me, you're going to need this early on as you don't really have many options for survivability. And of course, Maestro, pretty much every skill in the game that can increase skill damage will also work on the shoulder mounted cannons, as they also count as skill damage. So we're gonna take this one too. Also, indirect projectiles pretty much do exactly the same thing, which is why we go with asymmetric warfare. This also focuses and does affect action skill weapons. Then we're gonna get the hostile acquisition. I really like this for even more survivability. It gives you 90% chance in this case, or like 50% by default, lifesteal, which means you can stay in the enemy's face and get those constant heals going as you're dealing damage. You can also go with Aaron Spark as an alternative in the end game for extra damage, but for survivability early on, this is going to help a ton. And finally, the double auto shot, and we're going to further increase the ricochet chance even more with the lateral plinking. This is going to increase indirect projectile ricochet by another 25%, so that's going to help even more. On the other line, there are a few more things that just help a ton with our overdrive mechanic, further extending the duration of it, so thus increasing the time we're under the damage, movement speed, health regen, and so on duration. So this is going to be done via Everdrive, which is going to increase our overdrive duration. Also Devil May Care, which is going to give us more action skill cooldown when we're not in overdrive, and movement speed and more health regen when overdrive is active. And finally Soltado, which is going to just double all of these bonuses outright when we take down enemies. And since we're going to be doing that all the time, it has a very long duration, 8 seconds, so we're pretty much constantly under that effect. The only other thing I got at level 30 over here for this lower level build is Midnight Oil, which helps a bit extra with some more damage from corrosive damage, about 10% since we quickly take the stacks. This is why I took it for a little bit of extra on top. So this is pretty much it in terms of the skill itself, but let me show you what actually truly enables it to the next stage, going over the weapons themselves. So what you're going to mainly focus on are Jacob's weapons or weapons with Jacob's licensed parts. Torg is another option too, but Jacobs is going to be your biggest and most important of them all. And then we're going to combine them with these specific enhancements right here. So it doesn't matter what weapon you have, combine it with this enhancement, specifically the one that makes weapons with Jacobs licensed parts to gain a 40% chance to ricochet from non-critical hits as well, which is going to give you a massive boost in damage. If you already have a weapon that shoots multiple projectiles anyway, and if that weapon also has a Jacobs licensed part, every single one of those bullets can now ricochet both from critical hits and non-critical hits. And as you would imagine, that is what makes this build so powerful. Now, there is an alternative until you get this to go with the one that only extends your ricochet by 1. That is also very strong, but this, in my experience, has been absolutely out of this world, being able to melt everything. So what we can do is combine that with any multi-projectile weapon that has the ricochet effect on it. So in this case, one good example is the kickballer, which by default is nothing to speak home about, but when it gets the Jacob's part, it actually gets to become a truly different beast. So by default, this is going to pretty much shoot out 4 spherical projectiles. The first one explodes into the second, third, and the fourth one, and pretty much every single one of them with that ricochet effect now has a chance to further ricochet from targets, which we now made possible via the enhancement to trigger from non-critical hits as well. And I guess you're kind of starting to see where I'm going with this one. And now this means we have 4 projectiles that can each trigger ricochets both from critical hits and from non-critical hits. Now, what you need to keep in mind is that that chance to trigger on non-critical hits is still only 40%, meaning that if we only go with one projectile or one shot, we're gonna take a lot longer to actually trigger those really crazy multiple ricochets that happen at one time. That is why a weapon with as many projectiles as possible plus ricochet is what's going to make this build so freaking awesome. So in this case, if I were to take down some of these targets, you can see that sometimes it takes like 2, 3, 4 shots, sometimes maybe even 5 if I'm super unlucky, for them to actually start triggering all of those ricochets. But once they do happen, they can actually have a really big chance of triggering all of this, and then every single projectile has a chance to itself ricochet and cause other projectiles to appear, all the way to absolutely melting entire groups of enemies. Now, I'm pretty sure that this is going to get fixed at some point, so this is your disclaimer. I cannot see a universe in which this lasts for more than a week, but who knows, because I've been playing with this for over a week at this point, so maybe, I don't know, give it a try and you're gonna probably have quite a lot of fun. Now, there are a few other items here that I recommend on top of this, some of which I covered in the perfect start guide, but specifically, since you're gonna have all of these projectiles pretty much bouncing everywhere, you're going to also get hit at some point or another, so you're going to need to survive that. That is why I recommended in the previous video to get the onion shield in this case, which is going to give you 2 seconds of complete immunity for every single armor piece break. So if you have like 4 segments, every segment triggers its own 2 seconds of immunity. You, by the way, get that from right here from Sludge Maw, but you do have to complete a faction mission that spawns after Soul, one of the first important boss encounters in the main campaign. Is going to be a bit south over here from the launch pad. The moment you see this mission appearing over here, go ahead, complete it, because at the end of it you're going to get the boss encounter you can repeat to have a chance at the onion shield. Now, if for some reason this is going to eventually get fixed, it doesn't really matter because this build stands on its own. So let me show you a few other things that you can do to actually make this work. And you don't even need to go with the Jacob's weapons if you don't want to. You don't need to get those licensed parts. You can still go with something else. I covered a torque gun before, which works really great. And you can just let the turrets on your shoulders to handle the ricochets and whatnot. And you can go with something else because this build gives you a lot of possibilities. So torque and going with any of these enhancements that further buff the torque projectiles, especially the ones that either give it direct damage or some damage and damage radius, are 2 of the best options. So Hazardous, Cherry Popper, and the Hefty Pounder can be 2 of the best options for it. That worked really great, since Lead Balloon is an amazing early torque gun that we also got. But if you want to stick with it, you can also use the Hot Slugger shotgun. You get this from the Callous Harbingers. This is going to be here at a bunker in the heart of the mountain, a little bit further into the game, unless you're lucky and get it as a world drop from somewhere. I'm pretty sure you can actually get it in quite a few locations, but obviously you're free to build around this as you see fit. Your shotguns already deal the majority of the damage. So let's go over one of these boss fights over here that I had against Soul. He's been pretty much one of the bosses that we've unfortunately been farming on repeat, but he's a very good example because he does have immunity. So that immunity actually triggers after like about 20 seconds. So let me show you what happens when we actually take down the immunity and how long it takes for us to take him down even at this lower level footage that we have. So after breaking it, it's just gonna be a couple of shots, and yeah, it's pretty much going to be a goner right out of the gate right there. That's of course a lucky run in which the bounces kind of worked in our favor. It's not always going to be quite as clean. Sometimes it may take a few shots extra, but yeah, this is just one of the things that you can do with it. Now, I will give you a disclaimer at the end of this video, which is the fact that if you use this mechanic, you better be prepared to leave the area entirely afterwards, because chances are that sometimes it becomes so bad with the ricochets that it doesn't stop for entire seconds after the boss fight has been done, because for some reason the bounces can happen from just hitting the environment as well. I'm pretty sure there's a bug right now in the game that makes it bounce a little bit too much for its own good, so I don't really expect that this is going to last for too long. This is pretty much it. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time,